Okay. Okay, so let's just tie up some loose ends. We were learning yesterday about the importance of being forgiving, even to someone who has offended you. And we looked at Hilchos Yom Kippur yesterday. Just some likutim, which is just some case histories, some addenda on page. Okay. Achovel b'chavero. He says, Ayin Imrei Yaakov shehevenu dine chiyuv chamisha dvarim shemizchayev hachovel b'chavero. So just we reviewed this issue of that there are 5 different types of compensation: nezek, tsar, ripoy, boshes, sheves. Okay, all of the different things, work lost, medical expenses, etc. Uli inyan sheves isa sham b'shulchan aruch siman taf chaf seif yud zayin denosein lo shivto shel kol yom v'yom kapol batel shel osam malacha shebatel mimena. Now, as far as how to estimate time lost from work, the Shulchan Aruch says that you pay him like a poel batel from that malacha. In other words, depending upon what his profession is, will determine how much you have to pay him from time lost off from work. If he's working as a mashgiach, and he's getting paid a relatively low salary, so then you estimate what a person who does hashgacha work would be willing to take to not have to work for that day. In other words, based on his salary, certain sort of like scale, based on his salary, if he would be told, we'll pay you, but just don't come to work today, that's what you pay him. If a person is a lawyer, or a person is a physician or other kind of professional, where they're normally getting used to getting paid on a much higher scale of salary, so then obviously you're going to have to pay them more per time lost. And as far as medical expenses, that's discussed extensively in the Shulchan Aruch, and we're not going to go into that now. How you all the costs that go into medical expenses. If you spit on your friend, you spit in his eye, you spit on his face, or on any other part of his body, then you have to pay boshet, which is the cost of humiliating him. But if you only spit on his clothing, or you don't spit on him at all, but rather you just verbally embarrass him, you insult him publicly, you are patur from boshes. Surprisingly, you don't have to pay someone because you rank them out, which is like an art today, right? You afal pisha hamavayish b'dvarim eno bar tashlumin. So even though it's not collectible when you insult someone just verbally, but it is still, as the poskim say, a very significant sin, and we call such a person who insults someone publicly a fool, a wicked man, and an arrogant person. And there are poskim who suggest that you can even put someone under a ban, under a cherem, and like deny him privileges in the community. You're not getting an aliyah, and we don't want you to come to shul until you appease the person whom you publicly embarrassed. We talked a little bit about this before, about the based in having the discretion to ban someone for all different kinds of damage, even when there's no monetary collection possible. I know, it doesn't tell us how. Yeah. I said, well, the shtach, is not payable. It's only when you injure someone or spit on their skin. Yeah. So I don't know how that's calculated. I suppose that there must be some way of making an assessment, but it's not discussed here. Now, Cheresh shoyta v'katan pigiyasan ra'a, achovel bahen chayev. He says, if you injure someone who's mentally incapacitated or a minor, so then you are going to be liable. The heim shechavlu ba'acherim p'turim, but if they injure others, they are pater. In other words, so when the Gemara says pigiyasan ra'a, the interaction with them is a liability, is essentially what the Gemara is saying. Because you can be liable for injuring them, but they cannot be liable for injuring you. And this is true even after the child becomes an adult. The child goes ahead and causes damage. They are not liable to pay even when they get older. And similarly, if a person was a shaita, was mentally incapacitated, and then had some kind of recovery, you cannot collect from them even when they become lucid again. Because when they caused the damage, they were not in their right mind. They were not of sound mind. And some say that nonetheless, it is proper for someone who knows that when they were a minor, that they caused someone injury, that they should do their best to make it up to them when they get older. Students have to cover the cost. I think we did discuss this before. I think for property damage, I think the maskana is that even a parent can somehow say that they're not liable because children cannot always be controlled. I think that's what we had come out with, but there is probably a moral obligation. But I think al pi halacha, a parent can say it's not. You can't hold me liable. I didn't authorize my child to do that. That's why the Gemara says pigiyasan ra, because it's not collectible from a child, even if the child has parents. I believe that's what we said, but I'd have to go back and double check. Isha shechavla ba'acherim mishalemes la'achar zmanim niskar sho misalmana. Now, a woman who goes ahead and causes injury. She's married, she does not consider to have any of her own assets unless she does. In other words, if she has a separate bank account, then she would have to pay. But if she doesn't have a separate account and all of the funds of the marriage are held by the husband, so then she's considered to be destitute and therefore cannot be held liable to pay if she causes damage or injury. But if she gets divorced or widowed, then she does have to pay in retroactively for whatever damage she caused. And as far as what to do if she does have her own private assets that are controlled by the husband, based on the ketubah, let's say she brought property with her into the marriage, and it's legally hers, she holds title to it, but her husband has control over it. This is discussed whether or not she can be assessed from that property to pay for the damagee. Okay? Bachavero, if you injure someone, you have to make compensation. Shnaim shenit abku yachad, ve'echad hipil chaveru la'aretz v'nofal v'simeis eino patur. Two guys are wrestling, okay? They're wrestling for sport. And an accident happens, and one of them gets knocked down to the ground, and he gets his eye knocked out, God forbid, right? Or some other kind of significant injury. So the other party is patur. Why is that? The kaven denis avku shneim biratzon b'chol echad hayadaitu lahapil chavero. He says because they both willingly entered into the wrestling match. It's like if you go on a hockey rink, right? And I know that's you like playing hockey, right? Or any other sport, any contact sport that you willingly engage in. If someone injures you in the course of playing the game, so then that person will be patur because once you go onto the field, you've willingly entered into that risk. Obviously, if a guy takes his hockey stick and
suits where a player got hit. There's two cases that happened in the last 10 years in hockey where there's multi-million-dollar settlements from being hit on the ice.
Okay, I just realized I haven't shared my screen. I apologize. Right. So there's yeah. So right. So it has to rise to a level of deliberateness where a guy is maliciously goes out to injure someone on the rink, on the ice. Okay. Right. So, and here too, if two guys are wrestling, it's understood that under normal circumstances, or a boxing match or whatever, if someone becomes disabled as a result, the other party cannot be held liable. Each one was trying to topple the other and get him on the ground. And each party understood that sometimes it's impossible to avoid injury when you're in the process of you playing this sport. Umachalu lahadadi, and it's as if they sort of basically are forgiving to each other. Because, and this is the crucial line, it's clear from the circumstances that the other party did not set out to cause him this damage. But as you said, Ron, in a case where a guy is malicious in his intent and he just wants to use the game as an excuse, so then of course he could be held liable. Okay.
I mean, Rabbi, this is not that much different from what we talked about on the wedding dance floor and things like that, right?
That's right. Right. Oh, yes. Right. I'm trying to remember how long ago that was.
Seems some time ago, but and driving to Mincha and all those sorts of things where, I mean, that was a bit more problematic. But I think we said on the dance floor, that things could happen and people aren't doing it maliciously for sure.
Yeah. Right. The guy goes onto the wedding dance floor with a bunch of 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds, and they're just stomping their feet like crazy. There does come a time, guys, we're not young anymore. So yeah. So, it may be prudent to stay back. But if you do join,
I don't think I was ever that young, but besides the point.
But if you do end up joining that circle, it's enter at your own risk. Yeah. Okay. If you end up injuring your mother or father, and you actually, if you draw blood, then you are liable for the death penalty. Because the Torah says that he who strikes his mother or father shall be put to death. So lefichach lo yakiz haben la'aviv lo yotzi kotz mibisaro, and therefore, based on that, the poskim say that a person should not act as the physician for his parents if he has to draw blood from them, or if he has to, let's say, even remove a splinter. You're not their doctor, but your mom or dad has a splinter, and you got to take out the splinter, and it draws blood. But or even to squeeze out a pimple that a parent may have on their skin that could cause bleeding, you shouldn't do that. But that's only true. Of course, all of this is only true when there's another person that's readily available to do that. So a person should not opt to have his son or daughter draw their blood. But if there is no one else available, and the parent is clearly in discomfort or pain, so then as the Rama writes in Shulchan Aruch, that as long as the parent grants permission, then the child should do whatever is possible to do. And it could be that even sometimes he can also give a parent an inoculation whenever there's a need. So
it's very, very interesting, Rabbi, because we had this very topic yesterday on the Minchas Chinuch Shir. Dr. Silverberg was giving the share. We talked specifically about this, and then we got into, well, how about a dentist? Where can a dentist do work on their parent because it would save them a lot of money, but it could draw blood as well. It probably would. And or if a parent says, I won't get treated by anyone but my own son, does that change things? And it was fascinating discussion.
My mother got her implants from my son, and it's the same thing. It's a child to a grandparent. I don't know if it's an Isser Misa, but it's still Usser. But yeah, I mean, it's arguably the same thing, because when you do dental work, there's going to be bleeding many times. So it all depends on the circumstances. If the parent says, listen, I need you to do this because you're going to end up saving me money, or I don't trust anyone else, then obviously it would be in the same category. Yeah.
That's what this is talking about. But if you
well, he's talking about both. He's talking about both, because he talks about lo yakiza ben la'aviv. The child should not do a bloodletting for a father. That's the medieval form of medicine. So even when the son is a doctor, it's preferred that the son not treat his own parent, his own mother or father, right? If there's going to be a breaking of the skin. Yeah, you're right. Even if you don't break the skin, but you cause a bruise, that's considered to be breaking a blood vessel.
I mean, there's probably even other reasons as well, even apart from that. Might want not be too close to the situation and not be as objective, for example. Like even if you're just giving advice, I know that my wife's a physician and she'd rather her mother go see a doctor rather than her. Like, I mean, if it's something that has to be dealt with right away, that's fine. But just because you're just too close to the situation and you don't want to.
Right. It's possible, but that's not what the halacha was based
I understand.
Yeah. Right.
I can't sometimes, like a parent is a kid, I kick it back to the parent.
Right. Well, the child will be putter from the death penalty if they strike a parent, because the child is not subject to the death penalty. But that's the reason why we learned before that you're not allowed to strike a child as he gets older, because you may cause them to strike the parent back and make them liable for the death penalty. So you're not. That's the issue of lifnei iver. Do not place the stumbling block before your child by provoking them to strike back or defend themselves. Right. So you're right. Yeah, but this would not apply to a minor. But the child should know that if they strike a parent, what they're doing is it's serious avera. Unfortunately, we have kids today that the parents make them think that they're the parents, and that's a problem. That's a problem. My son just told my wife that he's in a dorm now in Israel, so he couldn't believe how some boys his age speak to their parents. Like, it shocked him, because he never heard people speak to their parents that way. Like, it's reassuring to us to know that we raised our kids in such a way that they know they can't, they would never speak to us. But he hears boys using 4-letter words and calling their parents all these terrible names, because some kids hate their parents. Mamish hate them with a real seething hatred. And a lot of times, the child is a troubled child, but a lot of times it's the parents' fault for enabling their child. Well, you have to express yourself. Yeah. Okay. Anyway. All right. Okay. Let us go on to the next halacha. Haroe es chavero tovea bayam olistim ba'im alav v'yachol lahatzilo hu ba'atzmo. If you see your friend drowning in water, or if you see robbers about to attack your friend, and you have the ability to save him, either yourself personally, or liskor acherim lahatzilo, or you can hire someone else to come in to your friend's aid. Chayav litroach v'liskor ulahatzilo. You are obligated to be, what they call the Good Samaritan, which of course we're never going to see in the poskim because the Samaritan is from the New Testament, right? But you are obligated to be a Good Samaritan. There's an obligation in halacha to help a person who is struggling and is about to either drown or be attacked. And even if it costs you money to do that, you're obligated to stop whatever you're doing, even if it means financial loss, and help save that person's life. V'chozer v'nifram imenu im yeshlo. And after the fact, after you've saved them, you are entitled to compensation for whatever out-of-pocket expenses you had to incur in order to save that person. Now, but that's only if the person has the money. What if the person is destitute? Vim lav lo yimna. You still are not allowed to abstain from saving their life. Let's say it's Yankel the schlepper or Yankel the schnorrer, okay? And you see that his life is in danger. You know that he doesn't have two nickels to rub together, but you still have an obligation to save his life. Vim nimna, and if you abstain from helping him, over alo samad al dam reacha. So what mitzvah do you violate? You shall not stand idly by over your brother's blood. Okay, so this is the last page. Let me just open up the next PDF. Give me 1 second, Chevra. Let's see here. Okay. So can you see this? The next page, Kuf Tzadi, can you see it on your screen?
Yes.
Sakana, and even the issue of, am I allowed to take risks to my own life to help save the other person's life? So he says, Yesh omrim shetzarich kidei lahatzel es chaver memisa vadois. He says, some say that you do have to enter into, a situation in order to help save your friend if you know for sure that if you do nothing, he will surely die. V'yesh cholkim bazeh, and others disagree. He writes in the parentheses, B'safek nefashos lahakel. And whenever there's a doubt about mortal issues, about issues of life and death, we are generally lenient to help you save your life. In other words, it seems that what he's suggesting is that if you feel that there's a risk to your own life, according to the second opinion, you do not have to enter into risk in order to save somebody else's life. And we're generally lenient, and we allow a person to take that option. So you see someone getting pulled away by the riptides, God forbid, right? And you go out to try and save them, but you realize that there's a risk to yourself as well. So you could say to yourself, it's not worth risking my own life in order to save his life. That would be justifiable. Now, obviously, that's a heart-wrenching kind of situation to be put in, where do I risk my life to save the life of the other? Do I run into the burning building? Do I not? Right? All of these situations, you think about 9/11 and the bravery of the firefighters who ran in to save lives. That's what they were trained to do. So what is the level of risk that I'm obligated to take in order to save lives? So when we go over this more carefully tomorrow, we'll see that it's a machlokas, the Yerushalmi and the Bavli, and we'll see, what the basis of this machlokas is. Okay, so let's go back to the Imrei Yaakov. Zion, Haroes Chavero, if you see your friend drowning, The tov, or it's not drowning, but you see drowning in the ocean or being about to be attacked by a band of thugs. The tov v'nachon la'od lihiyot b'chol ir va'ir misnadvim ba'am min hamaskilim. He says it is proper that in every city there are people who donate their time to be among those who are capable of detecting these kinds of situations. Lihiyot nechonim u'mezumanim l'chol devar hatzala, to be on the ready to help save people when they need to be saved. That's why we have an organization called Hatzala. What a beautiful organization, right? Its whole raison d'etre is to help people who are in danger, whose lives are in danger. They deal primarily with situations of medical emergencies, but let's say, there should be also people who are lifeguards who are donating their time if you live by the water, or there should be people who donate their time to patrolling the streets if it's a dangerous neighborhood. All of this, like they have an organization called the Shomrim, right, in neighborhoods where historically, thank God in Canada, you've never had to worry about this for the most part. But if there were times like in the 80s in New York City, they had patrols. I remember when I was in Kollel in the 80s in Baltimore, we had a nightly patrol of the neighborhood because there were robberies and there were muggings where I lived in Baltimore. And I donated one night out of my week to be part of a patrol. We'd go around with the flashlights in the car and just drive around the neighborhood. And that, I don't know if it still goes on, but that's what it used to be.
It's like these guardian angel.
So Moshe asked, is a person allowed to become a firefighter? It would seem, or a police officer, it would seem so. Yes, you're entering into a profession which involves additional risk. But the question is that once society, in other words, is a person allowed to enter into an occupation which involves risk? And the truth of the matter is that the Gemara talks about many professions where people would regularly get on boats, on ships to go find their fortune overseas, and talk about risks. That's why you bench goimel every time you get off a boat, because in the ancient and medieval world, getting on a boat, there was like maybe a 5% chance the ship would be either sink or through a natural disaster, or would be overtaken by pirates or something like that. Fact is that if there was just a 5% risk, I wouldn't get on a plane if there's a 5% risk it's going to crash. So we live in a much safer society today than we used to. So to say that a person can become a professional whose role is to risk his life at different intervals to help save other people, once society acknowledges that it's an acceptable risk for the sake of the preservation of society, then it becomes permissible for a person to choose that profession for themselves. So yes, it's okay for an Orthodox Jew to become a firefighter, to become a police officer. It's considered to be acceptable risk. It's considered to be a noble profession, right? Because I'm entering into risk. Certain medical professions where you deal with infectious diseases, right? And people would go to Africa during the 80s and help AIDS patients. That's a noble thing to do. We view that as noble, and as long as you take the proper precautions, you protect yourself. But were there doctors and healthcare workers who died from AIDS because they were exposed? Yes, but they were not derelict in their duty to protect their lives. You just have to take the proper precautions. Okay.
I wonder whether that's different from being a daredevil.
Yeah, Evel Knievel would not be
right. Not exactly helping society.
I don't think his name was Knievelovich.
Well, you never know.